right, my man, state your name. Let them know you on Real Talk with Nick.
Hey, my name is Bruce Lincoln, and it's Saturday in Mount Morris Park, and I'm on Real Talk with Nick.
That's what's up. That's what's up, man. Now, we want to do a little history lesson when we talk about these Knickerbockers, right? Obviously, you're a throwback Knick fan. We go back in the day, right?
Yep.
Who is your favorite player when we concern the Knicks, man?
My favorite player was Earl Monroe, and I got into Earl when he was doing his thing as Black Magic in Baltimore, and then when he came to the Knicks, I definitely became a big-time Knicks fan, and I like Walt.
Stop right there when we speak of Earl Pearl, right? You say he was on Baltimore.
Yep.
How was he as a player on Baltimore before he came to the Knicks?
Well, he made Baltimore a contender so that they would every year face off against the Knicks. So that was the start of that kind of heated rivalry between himself and Walt. And, of course, you know, Walt was D'ing everybody up, but the only cat he couldn't D up was Earl Monroe.
Now, it's funny you said that because I read some articles on Clyde Frazier where he said that Earl the Pearl gave him nightmares. Like, nightmares. Like, when he had to play against Earl the Pearl, like, it was overwhelming for him, man. He said night sweats, like wow, Earl the Pearl was that dude.
Behind that, where basically, actually, the first time they met, Walt was D'ing Earl up. He was on him.
So in the beginning, you saying Clyde Frazier had got the best of Earl the Pearl?
In this one game, until this moment I'm getting ready to describe.
Do you remember the game that Clyde Frazier had?
It was the first time that they met. It was it might have been in New York. I'm not sure. But basically, Walt was all over Earl, and Earl went up for a shot. And so he was going up with his right hand, and Walt was going to block it. Earl took the ball behind his back and laid it in with his left. And after that, he owned Walt. That's what Walt talks about in terms of the move that gave him nightmares.
And he couldn't stop it.
No one ever seen a move like that before. He's going up like this, took it behind his back, and laid on Walt with his left.
And that was all she
Paralyzed Walt, yep. That was it.
That was it.
And then, of course, you know, he came in the league. He had that unorthodox style of play, jaying from the left side of the body. And he was scoring 30, 35 points a game, shooting from 30, 35 points. And that predates the three-point line. So no one's seen a cat like that. And the Earl Monroe spin.
Okay. Is there any players today that remind you of Earl the Pearl?
Not one player, but players have aspects of his game. Kyrie has a super handle, and Earl had a super handle. You know, in terms of the ability to shoot, you see some of that with Steph Curry. But sometimes what you see a little bit of with Steph is some Walt. Because if you remember, Walt was the guy who would take you on the wing about 15 to 18 feet and fake on you, then double pump. So what you see with these guys today is that they've studied these older players and have incorporated their moves into their games. No one's really doing the spin anymore, like Earl used to do it, where it was just off one foot. But Kyrie has a super handle.
Okay, now I want to piggyback back on Earl the Pearl. When Earl the Pearl decided to come to the Knicks, what was it like for him to team up with Walt Frazier? Now it's no rivalry. Now they teaming up.
So basically what happened was Earl had a great season, but they lost once again to the Knicks in the conference playoffs. He went to the owner of the Bullets at the time. I think his name was Abe Poland. And at the time, believe it or not, Earl was only making $35,000 per year. So
That's
he asked.
it?
This is the 60s. So Abe Poland, however, was a billionaire at the time, but he refused to pay Earl his request, which I think was like $100,000, maybe $125,000. So Walt heard about that, ran into the front office and said, "Get Earl Monroe." And they basically offered Earl $150,000 per year, and that's how Earl then moved to the Knicks. And then you had basically that fantastic backcourt with him, the front court of Bill Bradley and Dave DeBusschere, and then, of course, the great center in Willis Reed, plus the backup players, right? Cazzie Russell, Stallworth. I'm drawing a blank on Phil, what's his name, who, you know, the coach from Chicago. That was Bill Bradley's roommate. So, I'm a kid of about 12, just starting to play ball. And so that's when I really got into basketball, once they had that great team at the Knicks, coached by Red Holt.
Okay, now I want to talk about that team that you just mentioned, the players. The starting five was Willis Reed, Bradley,
Dave DeBusschere, Bill Bradley, Earl
Frazier.
Monroe, and Walt Frazier.
Have you ever seen a tighter knit starting five on the Knicks since then?
No, that was a special team, of course, exemplified in their winning 2 championships. But they had an incredible one. Everybody was fundamentally sound, and then they played within a team offensive framework, and they played great D, especially anchored by Walt.
Speak to me about Akuba Walt.
Well, Walt Frazier basically, he had the fastest hands in basketball and actually some of the quickest feet. So some of the things that they talked about was that Walt could snatch a fly out of the air and catch it in his hand and then show it to you. And people saw him do that. One time, because of his severe cutting, remember his crossover move? He ripped out of a pair, back then we didn't have leather sneakers, he ripped out of a pair of high-top cons, the cloth con. So these cats had that kind of ability as far as basketball players. Plus, these are genuine 6'3", 6'4" players at that point in time.
Okay.
So, that's why everybody modeled their game after these guys.
Okay. Now you mentioned a player that I hear from time by time. Kaz on the Knicks.
Instant offense.
Talk to me about his game, man.
Well,
what position he played? Because you're going back, man. You're enlightening the youngsters.
He was a forward.
Okay.
He would come in and replace either Dave DeBusschere or Bill Bradley. He also could play some guard, but he was instant offense. And so Kazzy was legendary, going back to playing at the University of Michigan against Bill Bradley. Basically, Bill Bradley, in the game before they played Michigan in 1965, had like 50 points or something.
So that's how they met.
That's how they met.
They had a rivalry.
Princeton, Michigan.
And who won the rivalry between them two?
Kazzy. They won, I think, the NCAA that year in 65.
Okay. And when you speak of Kazzy, is there a player on the Knicks that or any player of today, when we speak of the game, that emulates his game? Being that you say they look at the film at the all-time greats.
I don't know. These guys have different kind of games, right? A lot of them, their game is predicated on the three-pointer. Back then, guys' game, not that they couldn't shoot from out there, their game wasn't predicated on the three-pointer. They could take you, but Kazzy was a great shooter. He could shoot from 20, 25 feet out, and that was his role. Instant offense. They'd bring him in with Dave Stallworth, and then together they would light teams up. They'd bring in Phil Jackson, and Phil would be a stalwart, down low. He had like a fluky left-handed hook. But all together, they worked together and had this chemistry.
Okay. Now, the starting five that you're speaking of, when we speak of that, with Willis Reed being the captain, right? Do you think they was able to compete doing... you know what? It's answer mine. I even answer this because obviously they got the championships under Red Holzman.
The Lakers.
Speaking of beating the Lakers, right? I think they beat them in what, 69 or
71.
And 71. Will Chamberlain. How was that, man? If you could reminisce and go back, Will Chamberlain playing against the New York Knicks, man. Will Chamberlain was a bad dude, man. How was that, man?
Okay, well, you have to look at that entire team because it was Wilt Chamberlain, it was Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, the first super shooter, and together that was a tremendous team coming from the West. And then Wilt basically had a great fadeaway bank shot. He would dunk on people, but he was
was he a bully?
Athlete. He just was agile and super strong. No one could push him around, but he was a great athlete. So he could take you from, 10 to 15 feet out with his fadeaway bank shot.
Okay.
Or he could go up in the lane, and he had a crazy long distance, Finger roll.
Yeah, I was watching some films, right? And I was watching some of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Will Chamberlain, and how that was Kareem's idol. At some time down the line, they became rivalries. They didn't like each other,
Mm-hmm.
and Kareem threw a shot at Will, saying that once he lost the championship to the Knicks, he hibernated. You know, and that he
Uh-huh.
never, he never stepped on the court again. After, they was just taking shots at each other, man.
Mm-hmm.
So when we speak of somebody like Wilt Chamberlain and his presence alone, man, tall dude, it was recorded that he had scored 100 points in one game.
He did score 100 points in one game. It wasn't well publicized, that game. It was kind of like some game out in a barn in Pennsylvania somewhere. So he scored 100 points. Then after that, he drove back and came to his club at Small's Paradise. You know, he owned Small's Paradise.
I never knew that.
He was a great entrepreneur as well. And so Smalls was a place that was integrated. Bill Bradley talks about coming up to Smalls and hanging out with the brothers. Bill Bradley would hang with the brothers.
Okay.
Which meant a lot then, because it's the 60s, right? We're just coming up where it was the height of the civil rights movement. So a lot of that was going on as well in terms of what these basketball players represented, because they were politically and socially conscious. They
Right.
understood business,
Right.
besides just being great basketball players.
Okay, now I would like to talk about the captain, man. Willis Reed, man. How important was this man to the Knickerbockers, man?
Well,
And what do you remember about Willis Reed?
I remember when he hurt himself, right? And they didn't know if he was going to play in the winning game against the Lakers. And basically, they shot him up with maybe cortisone, and he limped out. Standing ovation to start off the game for the final game. I think it was at Madison Square Garden, and he basically hit his first 4 shots, fadeaways on Wilt. And after that, they took him off the court, and the Knicks sort of owned the Lakers and won that game, and that's
Now,
legendary.
Hadn't Willis Reed stepped out the locker room and showed heart and courage, do you think the Knicks would have be able to beat the Lakers? He only scored 4 points.
I think it was 4 J's in a row. But however, what we're getting at is his moral presence is what propelled them to that win. It was so important for him to just step on that court, show that he was there in solidarity with his team. And it was exemplified in the fact that he got this standing ovation that they had to kind of say, yo, look, y'all got to sit down so we can start this game. And then he came out and he did work.
Oh, so you saying when he came out, they couldn't even start the game at first?
Because the standing ovation was so long.
Wow.
These are these amazing moments in sports that it stays with people. I'm 67 years old. I still remember that stuff. And these were games you watched with your parents, right? They became things you talked about in the community. And then for cats like myself who were college bound, these cats represented that ideal of like, damn, man, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to play ball. I'm going to bust out school. They were upstanding guys. Now, of course, Clyde was what they called at the time a Beau Brummel, right?
What you mean by that? A Beau Brummel?
Beau Brummel is a cat who can dress. And, of course, that's a big thing in the black community. So Clyde was wearing the fur coats, driving the Rolls Royce. Sometimes he would take the subway just so that folks could see him in his signature suits and wearing his fur coats. He'd like to drive through the community in his Rolls Royce, be a role model to the kids. I remember being at Princeton. I was there with a buddy of mine. We both were on the freshman basketball team, and we found a book in the Princeton Library, of all places, called Clyde, A Study in Style and Fashion. And it just talked about Clyde, how he looked at the world, what he thought was cool, his advice to people. He didn't drink, but he talked about how he dressed. And, you see that today, right? When he announces a game, he's rhyming. He's got the flamboyant suits. So those are kind of things that, move into the realm of like legend and culture.
Okay.
Which is what a lot of us think about at our age when we watch the game of today. Not that you can't take away from how good Kevin Durant is and Steph, of course, LeBron. But there was something about those players, and actually, they didn't have a 3-point line, and they averaged over 100 points a game, so they did a lot of scoring too.
Okay. Now I want to go back to that infamous championship series between the Lakers and the Knicks. When Will Chamberlain stepped out the locker room, right?
Willis Reed?
Willis Reed, excuse me. Were the Lakers astonished? Were they in? Did they thought they
Oh
seen a
yeah,
ghost?
no, I think it had a psychological effect on him when he walked out, and everybody stood up and just cheered for him. And he,
Even the Lakers? Do you remember the Lakers cheering?
yeah, because they were all gentlemen sportsmen, right? They also cheered for him. But once they got on the court,
All bets was off.
it was sort of, you knew what the outcome was going to be. The Knicks had it psychologically, game wise. But it's another one of those great series, where it was the Lakers and the Knicks going head to head.
Okay.
Because you had Wilt, right? Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, I think Jim McMillan, Gail Goodrich.
Now, when you speak of a player like Jerry West, how good was he?
Super shooter. People don't realize how good he was, But they asked one time, it's like, so are you surprised when you make a basket? He goes, man, I'm surprised when I miss. So he never expected to miss when he shot. And of course, he hit the 75-foot shot to win a game in that series. So he was a great shooter.
And let the viewers know when we speak of Jerry West, what position he played.
He was a guard for the Lakers. They called him Zeke from Cabin Creek. He played at West Virginia. Super shooting. The guy could just really shoot. And then he also was a great defender. He used to like to let guys go up in the air, and he would sneak up behind him and block them from behind.
Okay.
And then I saw him one time working out on it was like a commercial. Back then they would have these commercials showing cats doing their moves. And they showed him running around, catching the ball, jaying. And then one time he jayed with his left. So you're talking about guys had that level of skill, right? They were ambidextrous. They had handles. They weren't flashy. Earl was flashy. Walt did use the behind the back. But most of the guys were just doing, the crossover dribbles and the inside hand change.
Okay, now I would like to talk about a play on the Knicks. At that time, who won rings chips with the Knicks? Who gave the Knicks of the 90s when we speak of Patrick Ewing, John Starks, Anthony Mason? Stop them from getting chips. And that player is that of Phil Jackson. How was Phil Jackson? What was his position, and how was he as a player? In terms of the
role he played on those teams?
As a Knick.
He was a bench guy. He would come off the bench, play his role. He would fill in at the center position or sometimes forward. He'd get rebounds. He'd, get past the ball to trigger the fast break. He had like a really herky-jerky hook shot. His sort of claim to fame, he was a great basketball mind, right? Tremendous basketball IQ. So he was Bill Bradley's roommate. So he basically, would hang with Bradley. Bradley, was like an intellectual guy. So he would talk about all kinds of
So Bradley and Jackson was very close.
Yeah, they were buddies.
Okay. But was Phil Jackson, all right, let me say this. This is what I want to ask you. Could you picture him as a coach then?
No. But once he became a coach, it made sense. Because because of his basketball IQ.
Well, that's what all right, but you ain't see the IQ then at the time?
You could see how he played. He was a smart basketball player. And also, back then they played within an offensive set up by Red Holzman. So it was a motion offense, but it allowed each player to use their skills to the utmost. So, for instance, they would set picks for Bradley. Bradley would come off the pick on a curl and get a pass from Earl or Walt, and that was his thing, dollar bills. So, he was a great jump shooter. DeBusschere was a hard-working kind of blue-collar kind of guy who would be down low with Willis, hitting the boards.
So Bradley was like modern Draymond Green. Would that be safe to say?
Nah, what's his name was more like that.
Who?
Jackson was more like that, or DeBusschere. Bill Bradley could shoot, so I mean he could shoot from way out. But so what they would do is run him off picks, and then he'd catch and shoot, whether it's on the right side or the left side, from the corner to the top of the key.
Okay, all right. But the most impressive player on the New York Knicks that you ever seen would be?
Well, my favorite was Earl because of his game, but also you can't take away from Walt Frazier. But what it was, man, you had 5 great players all together playing on the floor at the same time, working their system.
Working the system.
You know,
And
so they all played their role.
Now, was that more of an offensive or defensive team under Red Holzman?
Both. They played tough D, of course, anchored by Walt. And then they had a great offensive set that Holzman set up that worked well for who they had. And then, like I said, they could bring in Cassie and Dave Stallworth. Those guys could shoot.
All right, now I'm going to bring it all in one circle, right? When we speak of the Knicks of the 90s, right, that of Patrick Ewing, John Starks and company, what was missing when we speak of fans like yourself that witnessed the Knickerbockers under Red Holzman?
They couldn't quite, well, a couple of things. You know, they had the one game where they just had their fight with Miami, the bench clearing brawl, and that ended their opportunity to go further in the series. So they didn't have that sort of, mental stamina, if you will, to know, like, you can't fight. But they were brawlers, so that was part of the team, that had been.
Were the Knicks brawlers when we speak of Frazier, Earl? They wouldn't fight if they had to?
But they were tough. Well, they could box you out and make sure they would get the rebounds, because they were playing against guys like Wilt and Bill Russell and other, serious guys hitting the boards. But they weren't they never got into a fight. If you remember, this of course predates you. Phil Chenier was the guard who came to the Bullets after Earl went to the Knicks.
Now, who's that name you mentioned again?
Phil Chenier.
Now, break down Phil Chenier, man.
Phil Chenier was kind of like supposedly the second coming of Earl Monroe, but not really, because he didn't have all the moves. His game was sort of more like that.
And he played for the Knicks?
Bing. No, he played for the Baltimore Bullets.
Oh, Baltimore Bullets.
So he replaced Earl. And one time, he basically cold-cocked Walt Frazier. He got mad at Walt for something and snuck up behind Walt and punched him in his face.
Wow. And that was because Walt was getting the best of him?
Yep. So Walt didn't do anything. Walt didn't start a fight. He just walked away. But how he retaliated, he scored 50 points on Phil Chenier, and they had to sit Phil Chenier on the bench. And after that, Chenier's game wasn't the same. And that's what Walt could do. Walt was great offensively, and he could just turn it on, take it to another level where you couldn't play with him.
Now, Walt Frazier. The matchup, I know it was this different time, but if you could get Kyrie and Walt Frazier, both at the prime, matching up, who would get the best of who?
Walt.
Over Kyrie?
Yeah, Walt's better than Kyrie. But Kyrie would get his too. But one of the issues about Kyrie is he's never quite achieved his potential, and he's got tremendous potential. But he got the closest to it when he was paired with LeBron, and they were able to win the championship at Cleveland. But if Walt was in his prime, he would D Kyrie up.
Well, no problem.
I don't think without any problem.
All right.
And that's just my opinion.
Now, I want to bring up another Knick great, Bernard King.
Oh, my God. He was great. He was great. Remember, he had back-to-back 50-point games when their rivalry was against Boston with Larry Bird and Kevin McHale, and he would light them up.
Every time they played.
He had that stretch after the All-Star game where he almost, I think, was averaging 50 points a game. But he definitely had back-to-back 50-point games in the playoffs against Boston. But the deal was, if he got the ball out there on the fast break, he couldn't stop him. Right side, left side, he would just take it to the hoop. What brought him down, was when he blew out his MLS.
And at that time, the Knicks traded him off. Because the Knicks had Bernard King. And they traded him. Were you upset by that trade, man?
Yeah, I was. But I was glad that he was able to come back and play again, because the sports surgery wasn't as advanced as it is today. So for him to come back from that meniscus tear was big, and a tribute to Bernard King and the type of player he was. But he was a great player.
Yeah, what was his strength?
His O. No one could stop him offensively. Whether it was the J, but certainly on the fast break when he would take it to the hoop, right side or left side.
And was he great on defense?
He was a good defensive player, but no one remembers that. We all remember how he would take people to the hoop. And he was exciting that way.
Okay, and this is the last question, man. You summing it up. If Bernard King had a chance to play with Patrick Ewing, think the Knicks would have got some more titles, man?
Yeah, I think so. Because that's what we were hoping for, right? It never happened. That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate, and there are some people who I think, and I don't think it's correct, they blame Patrick for us not winning certain championships, but I think it was because he didn't have the right supporting cast. So when you bring up what it would have been like to have Bernard King and Patrick together, that's an intriguing idea, and it makes you think like, yeah, they probably could have done it.
All right, man. That's what it is,
All
man.
right,
I want
brother.
to thank the OG for coming out here. Nice summer day. Somewhat nice, it could be a little sticky. But we're in the Hall of Harlem talking Knicks. He gave a great history lesson on the Knickerbockers under the leadership of Red Holzman. He talked about you just got to watch, man. I hope y'all ain't just speed to the end to see what it was like. Go through the whole damn interview. My man dropped it down, man. How do you feel about these Knicks under Tom Thibodeau before we sign off? And do you think...
I think they got a good team that they can build on. It was good to see them in the playoffs. And you only get better at the playoffs by being in the playoffs, right? But they got some good players. Brunson is tough. Randall is tough. So they're only going to get better. It's been a long time since they were in the playoffs, so we were excited to see them there. We thought they were going to go a little further.
Okay. And if you could give one advice, man, to these Knicks today under Tom Thibodeau, after looking in the Red Holzman playbook, what advice would you give them?
I think it always revolves around basically being able to stay mentally focused, so that you don't get flustered when things don't work out for you, because the next play could be that play that changes the game. It's not like these guys don't have the physical ability to play basketball. So I think it's the mental thing now, where it's like you really get that winner's attitude, you get that mental focus, you up your basketball IQ, and then, of course, the intangible is your heart.
All right, and that's what it is, y'all. Class is over. Take notes. We out. Peace.